So that is your consent to be recorded. I want to welcome everyone to the April 21 Rita B. Leahy Career Series. The whole purpose of this series is to bring doctoral alumni in contact with current doc students and postdocs so that you all can learn much more about the opportunities, the career opportunities outside of academia. Today, we are focusing on entrepreneurship and startups. And when you get to hear the career stories of each of our panelists, I think you're thinking about what entrepreneurship is really going to expand. Also, you're going to see that career is not a straight line. There's lots of zigs and zags. And today's panelists, their career stories really illustrate that. I am actually going to let each one of them in just a moment introduce themselves, but they are going to talk in the order that their photos are here. You can see that they come from 3 different departments, and on the slides, which we will make available as well, you can link to each of their LinkedIn profiles. And some of them may actually be willing to provide their email addresses later in the presentation. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask Dr. Arion to start his 10 minutes. Dr. Arion, I'll just give you a little signal when there's 2 minutes left, and then we'll go on to Dr. Murdther, and Dr. Borak. And they've asked me to call them by their first names. So Douglas, you're going to go first.
Very good. Thank you very much. A pleasure to meet everyone, and thank you for the invitation to participate here. As Susan mentioned, our careers have been different. Mine probably has more directions in it than most people. Briefly, I got my PhD at Maryland in physics back in 1984, so I'm one of the graybeards in this entire situation here. And currently, I'm allegedly retired. Allegedly, because I'm just as busy as I've ever been. And I run a public science education program called Mountains of Stars, where we partner with conservation organizations and a number of academic institutions to do what we call environmental awareness from a cosmic perspective. We use astronomy as a way to engage the public and teach about the environment. Now, how I got here is a rather sort of random walk sequence. I was recruited to go to grad school at Maryland by a gentleman named Herb Lashinsky, who was a graduate school classmate at Columbia of my undergraduate thesis advisor. That was one of the ways I got there. I was interested in both fusion physics and nonlinear dynamics, and Herb was very involved with that. So I started there in 1979. Unfortunately, Herb had a heart attack and passed away during my first year of grad school, so my support and my research plans kind of went out the window. However, through another random walk process, the person who had been my freshman advisor at Dartmouth was then at the University of Maryland, Rick Ellis, and he took me into his lab, and I learned all sorts of experimental plasma physics techniques that had really formed the basis for an awful lot of my career, and I thank him tremendously for teaching me what he did. But what it also meant was after I left his research and started working with some folks in astrophysics is that I didn't have financial support, so I had to write my own grant proposals. And so I started to learn the business of science by being forced to support myself to do my graduate work. So that got me a NASA fellowship. I had to apply for the grant money. And that got me connected with a gentleman by the name of Jim Ianson, who was adjunct at Maryland, full-time at Goddard, up the road there, down Greenbelt Road, just go up one and hang a right. And to talk about networking here that's really interesting, I would go visit him in his office, and he shared his office with a postdoc by the name of Phil Morrison, who had gotten his doctorate at Maryland. And as I was finishing there, he had finished his postdoc and was working for a company called SAI, Science Applications Incorporated, and he called me up and said, "Hey, I hear you're looking for a job. Do you want to come interview?" And I went, "Sure." So I interviewed with them, and it was a great group of people doing interesting work in nuclear survivability, nuclear weapon survivability. And to make a long story short, I got a great job with them. And so I spent 5 years working with them in their office in McLean. It got me connected with a group in the company that was out in Albuquerque, New Mexico, And again, to keep a long story short, and I can tell you a lot of the details, I got asked to form a new division of the company doing experimental work in the nuclear survivability area. And so I became the company's youngest vice president and division head, and built an entire business with a tremendous group of physicists and engineers. And that got me involved in how you run companies and how you launch products and how you do services and all the financial and management issues. And of course, nobody had ever trained us for this. There was no training. I had to learn it on the fly, seat of the pants while I was there, which, by the way, is not the best way to learn it. After doing that for quite a few years and looking to kind of just sort of change gears, I lived on airplanes. I had staff all over the country. It was very intense work. I was recruited to a college in Wisconsin, a little college nobody's ever heard of called Carthage, because they had gotten a donation from an alum to start a program in entrepreneurship and career development for science students. So in 1994, I started the country's first undergraduate program in preparing students for actual careers in science. And our graduates are by far the most successful anywhere, because we actually pounded into them all the stuff that you really need to know when you graduate that nobody bothered to teach you. And that got me connected with a lot of economic development organizations and companies and businesses. And we launched all sorts of new products and services. And I'm still heavily involved in innovation and entrepreneurship education. I've been on a couple of major national panels that have put out some big reports from the national academies. We've run workshops around the world on how to do this. I've done some in Brazil and South Africa and Canada. So I've been very, very connected with all of those different communities. So to give you a couple of what I think are some of the key things here. Opportunities present themselves and you don't even know that they're there. They'll slap you in the face. Who knew that just saying hello to Phil every time I went in to talk to Jim Ianson was going to turn into the job that became my career? Being friendly and connecting with people is something that will happen. And that leads me to one of the most important things I try to teach students. And you might have heard the old phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know, and that's not correct. What is correct is it's not what you know, it's who knows you. Your job is to become known. I've taught thousands of students. They all claim that they know me, right? Oh yeah, I know Dr. Arion. Yeah, I was in his class. But that's not your job. Your job is to get me to know you, so that when you call me 15 years later or 5 months later or 5 minutes later, I will remember you and I will like you and I will do things for you. It wasn't that I knew Phil Morrison, it's that Phil knew me. He knew me, so he called me to offer an opportunity for a job, right? It wasn't that I knew Herb Lashinsky. I didn't know Herb Lashinsky, but he got to know me because I was a student of one of his classmates. So that's one of the most important things, is getting people to know you. And that means doing things like going to conferences and talking to people. It means going to talks at your local community business development organization. It means visiting companies. It's getting people to know who you are and what you can do. I think that's one of the most important things. There is way more out there than what's in academia. By the time I got done at Maryland, I can honestly say, and this is my opinion, others on this call may violently disagree with me, but when I was graduating, so this is 1983 when I was really finishing, fall of 83, assistant professor salaries were not very good. The tenure system is a really strange entity in many ways. The old adage, you can work on whatever you want to work on in academia, is a complete lie. You can work on whatever you can get funded, which means you still got to sell it to somebody. And when you're in the industrial world, I worked for SAI for 15 years. I never did the same experiment twice. I used every bit of physics every single day. It was an absolute utter blast. I made way more money, had way more control over what was going on, did not have to worry that some political thing was going to kick me out 6 years in for no fault of my own. It was a great way to do that. And there's so much of that that's out there. And so many of the things that you'll do will not be directly connected to what you studied. But the skills and the knowledge and the general abilities you get are really going to be key. So I think that's my 10 minutes or so.
It
I'll be
is.
happy to tell you more about these things, but definitely building up that skill base, learning things about the business world, learning how to write and speak, because most of you don't know how to write and speak, and it's not your fault, nobody taught you. Being able to write very efficiently, that's one of the most important things as well. And I'll mute myself so that the others can have their opportunity and then answer later.
Perfect. We're going to go on to Nalini. Thank you so much, Douglas.
Thank you. And I probably underscore everything Douglas said. That was really, really nice. I'm Nalini Murdther, and it's very nice to meet all of your faces or videos on the call here. And I graduated quite some time ago, a little later than Douglas did, from the Department of Chemistry at University of Maryland. And I will say that today I'm quite different from who I was when I graduated. And my life has also taken, you see the waters behind me, water flows. And I now have learned, after working in industry for 25 years, I've learned that, you know, you should go with the flow. It takes you in a very interesting journey in your life. And don't be afraid to take things that may be completely different from what you ever imagined. So I start today. Today, I'm the SVP of Mergers, Acquisitions, Integration and Operations at Crown Bioscience, which is one of the companies that belongs to JSR Life Sciences, the parent company. I actually work at the parent company, and I'm assigned to various companies really to do change management and bring about, improve their business prospects, if you will. So my background is in the life sciences industry, and I've spent my time doing deals, doing commercialization, doing business management, running a business. And my career spanned both startup companies as well as large companies. So you might ask, what does that have to do with a PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology? A lot and very little. I did get an MBA along the way, but I will tell you that one of the things that I've learned to say about myself is I can take very complex science and I can build it into a compelling value proposition for a business or for a customer. And I think, you know, one of the things that you take away when I look back from my career, and I see people who did their undergrads and went straight into industry and they're CEOs today. And it's taken me this long to do my PhD, do my postdoc. I'd have a master's, PhD, postdoc, and then go into industry. I wish, sometimes I tell myself, did I really need the PhD? But two things you learn. Number one is it does give you cadre. It does give you a position to speak from authority on science. Number two, you learn two very important skills. You learn how to solve a complex problem, and you learn how to persevere no matter what, because a PhD is not easy to get. And those of you who are in it, it was the hardest thing I did, really, because you have ups and downs, and you struggle when your experiments fail, but you persevere because you know at the end you're gonna you know get that doctorate, and then the world is open to you after that. I did a postdoc for 5 years, and just a little bit about my journey. I always thought, I come from a family of scientists, so I always thought I would be a scientist and I would go into academia. That was my goal from when I was a little child. I wanted to be a scientist, be a famous scientist, do something earth-shattering, and that's where I was going to go. But during my postdoc years, I got married and then I had a child, and I thought, oh, this time is never going to come again. I'm going to stay home with this child. So I stayed home for a year. And at that time, I started to think, well, now if I go into academics, I have to apply for grants. And my postdoctoral advisor was really wanting me to go into academics. But I thought applying for grants, getting tenure, I'd have to work night and day. And my problem was, once I was in a lab, I lost track of time. And if you have a child, you can't afford to lose track of time. So I decided I'll take an industry. It'll just be a 9-to-5 job. Wrong, but nevertheless, I was naive then. So I applied into industry, and I started in a diagnostics company. And at the time, many of my friends were going to very large, my postdoctoral friends were going to very large pharma companies and getting some amazing jobs. And I thought, why do I want to go to this little company? By then I had a postdoc at Caltech, and I thought, well, I'm from Caltech. I should be able to get into a better company. But, it's transferable skills. I was a researcher at the time and hadn't made any products. So I went into this little company, and it was the best thing I ever did. When you work for a small company, you wear a number of hats. So although I was a researcher, very quickly I rose into managing multiple groups of teams, heading up product development. And then because, like Douglas said, I love people. I went out without knowing it. I was very shy, but at the same time, my curiosity about science always got the better of me. So I'd go to conferences, I'd meet people, and I'd go, oh, that technology is interesting. Maybe I can bring it into the company, which led me into licensing and business development. And so what that did for me is get me into learning how to negotiate, learning how to bring technologies in, at the same time, develop those technologies into products, which is a whole thing unto itself. And that led to I would say, a changing point in my career. I did some very big, I did a pivotal deal, I would say, for the company that really positioned it in a unique new light. And I also developed products that went to market. So over time, I started then heading product and business development. And I was very lucky. I had a wonderful, my boss, who was a CEO of the company, and I actually ended up having two bosses. Both of them were very supportive and really mentored me and helped me to grow as a person, as a leader, and all of those things. And I discovered skills I never knew I had. I did not know I had leadership skills, but over the years, I've honed them, grown them, and you don't know what's inside of you until someone pushes you over the edge and a new skill comes out. And I found that when I have people that report into me, I try to push them over the edge a little bit. And if I see a spark within, I try to grab that and bring it out of them. And I think that's a very important thing for a leader, a manager, or anything, to groom your people and to find gold nuggets within them and bring that out of them. So my managers at the time encouraged me to go to business school, and that's when I went to Berkeley to get my MBA while I was working, and I had a second kid. And it was tough. I will not tell you. I have a very supportive husband, and my kids were 5 years apart, which made it easier. But it was tough. I barely slept for three hours a night. But long story short, through my career and learning, I've learned, your kids are the most important thing in your life. So if you have families along the way, don't ever forget that. My kids are grown up now. We're a very close family, and we're very close to them, and we have great times together. And I'm proud of that fact. However, I did slow my career a little bit. In other words, I could have probably risen to SVP and CEO earlier on. I chose not to. After I finished my stint while I was in business school, I moved to a large company. And one of the reasons I did that was, part of it was curiosity about science. But the second reason was that I wanted branding from a large company. So if you're thinking about industry, there's pros and cons to going to a startup and a large company, and they're both equally exciting in my view. A small company, and I've gone in and out of small and large. I'm in a large now. I've done 2 small and 2 large. And a large company will teach you a lot of good business skills, process skills, will also give you a lot of learning opportunities, training, grooming, and all of that. But a small company, don't go to one if you aren't ready to roll up your sleeves and have a wild ride, because you're just going to roll up your sleeves and go. You wear multiple hats, you'll be thrown into different situations. There's always a sense of urgency because you're always running out of money. But you learn a lot. So it depends on your personality, where you want to go. I don't think I would have become as much of an extrovert if I hadn't worked at a small company. So, one of the things that I learned along the way in terms of skills, and you might notice I said my scientific curiosity got the better of me, and I lost my shyness trying to talk to other scientists at conferences. Douglas brought up networking. Networking is extremely critical. If I have to tell you one skill, and I think he put it better than I would have said it's not what you know, who you know. But I think what Douglas said was really important. It's not what you know, but who knows you. And I think that that's really important because you need to be able to network. And my philosophy is whenever I go somewhere, I always want to meet 3 new people. And so I would use that as almost a guidance. When you walk into a room and there's lots of people, meet 3 new people. And by the way, you never know who can be helpful to you. You just never know. I've met people along my journey and I just don't know, that have been helpful to me that I probably wouldn't even have thought would be helpful to me, right? So make it your mantra, meet 3 new people. And then I would say, go for your passion. Always be passionate about what you do. If you're not passionate, it just nothing will be, it just won't work for you. So I'll pause there. There's a lot I could tell, but love to be able to answer questions when we go into the Q&A. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Nalini. I'm writing these pearls of wisdom down. I'm going to share them with students in individual appointments, but Brian, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So nice to meet everyone here on the call, and thanks to Doug and Nalini who are here with me. My career is a bit shorter compared to Doug and Nalini here. And in some ways, I'm kind of on the flip side of kind of what they've told us about today already. So I'm a consultant, a technical consultant with Booz Allen Hamilton. And I've been there for a little over 10 years at this point. I went more or less straight out of the program at the University of Maryland. So I did my PhD in physical organic chemistry / photochemistry in the chemistry department. I did a very short postdoc thereafter, and then went to work for Booz Allen after that. My role is supporting a range of clients, mostly within the U.S. Department of Energy, in crafting new programs that address technology gaps, and in managing projects, technical development projects once they're underway. So my client has primarily been, over my 10 years there, which I think is rare that most folks in the large consulting firms have one client, but my client has been ARPA-E for the most part, which is the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy. And I actually see that JC Zhao, Professor Zhao, who used to be a program director, is currently logged on. So JC, nice to see you there. So for those of you who are who don't know ARPA-E, ARPA-E was started back in 2009, modeled off of the sister organization DARPA, which developed a number of kind of moonshot transformational technologies such as stealth technology, GPS technology. And so back in 2009, the agency was stood up to basically take a similar tack with energy technology and really go after those sorts of moonshot types of projects and follow a similar management structure. So Booz Allen had actually had a fairly large presence in DARPA for a number of years, and the Department of Energy had reached out to Booz Allen to work with them in standing up the organization and kind of getting the machine running and kind of starting off with getting its first program released, and then in subsequent years in expanding the program and in developing it further. So as a technical consultant for ARPA-E, my role has been mostly to support the federal staff members, the program directors and others there who are starting up new programs and in helping with identifying the opportunity white space, as we like to call it. So if the federal government were to dedicate some funding to specific areas for technology development, where would they have the most impact? that's not duplicative with what the private sector is doing, that's not duplicative with what other federal programs are doing, and really kind of push the needle and develop a really highly technical approach to how they go about selecting projects. So we assist them with performing that opportunity white space analysis in developing metrics for the programs, and then ultimately in helping to identify some of the best projects out there, and then in managing those projects. So unlike the National Science Foundation and some other programs which are more kind of exploratory in nature, ARPA-E and DARPA are very much more kind of outcome oriented and applied focused programs. So contracts are established with project teams that are awarded funding to meet specific milestones. Excuse me. And so we assist program directors in negotiating those milestones, and then managing and monitoring those projects along the way, and making sure that they're fulfilling their obligations, and then also we're ultimately communicating the successes of the programs. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I've been involved with at Booz Allen over the years. I mention ARPA-E mostly because they've been my principal client, but I've also worked with other offices within the Department of Energy, such as the Building Technologies Office, and a couple of other kind of limited engagements here and there. But pretty much it's all been focused in the material science, chemistry, chemical engineering realms. Honestly, it's been a blast for me, I would say, just because I've been able to expand my knowledge and learn a ton, well beyond what I thought I would learn, and just be exposed to some of the really great minds out there in energy, and be kind of on the forefront of what's going on. But this is, I would say this is definitely not the path that I envisioned that I would take at this point. Originally, I came to Maryland and started my graduate career because I was actually interested in energy technology, and I wanted to go into actually solar energy research. And so that's why I worked for Dan Falvey. He's a photochemist, and I was interested in kind of going into solar energy and material storage with electronic materials. And I really had my sights focused on working for a national lab, probably in the end. And that's kind of really what I was working towards throughout my career at Maryland. But about, I would say, midway through my career there, I actually was introduced to a project which I think Maryland still participates in. It's called the Solar Decathlon competition. It's a multi-university competition that the Department of Energy hosts, where teams will design and construct a solar energy powered house. And there's a competition that takes place over the course of a week or so. And so, traditionally chemists did not participate in that sort of an engineering and design architecture competition, but it was something that really intrigued me. And so I reached out to the program coordinators at Maryland who were in the engineering and architecture departments and said, hey, I'm really interested. I'd love to help out if I can in some way. I'm interested in solar energy. And, they said that, I can participate on some of the aspects of helping out with the solar energy system design. And it really kind of catapulted my interest in sustainable design in a range of different energy technologies and engineering in general. And so like from there, I really kind of was starting to get an appreciation for the sheer breadth of interesting energy technology that was out there. And so, when it came time to make a decision, when I was graduating, I actually did get an offer from a national lab to work for a national lab in photochemistry research. But at the same time, I was contacted by a recruiter from Booz Allen to actually work on the ARPA-E contract. And, I was like, this is interesting. I hadn't considered this. And, after going on some interviews and talking to the really bright people, both at Booz Allen and at RPE, I just got really excited about being on kind of the cutting edge of where R&D was going on across a range of different technology areas. And so that's kind of how I ended up where I am. And I know Susan's giving me the notification that I'm running out of time, so I want to be mindful of that. But just to inject a couple of my own nuggets of advice, and I agree completely with everything that Douglas and Nalini have said. I definitely echo their sentiments about networking. But I guess I would say, don't be afraid to go outside of your comfort zone when looking at jobs or considering opportunities, both within grad school and outside. Like for me, it was the Solar Decathlon that really kind of like changed my trajectory. And that wasn't on my traditional pathway. That was something I had to kind of like do on my own. But I would also say, like, just find other ways of connecting other fields to what you're doing. I'm finding more and more kind of cross-cutting areas are where there's a lot of interest. And I think, that will kind of carve out a niche for yourself as well. The more you can kind of connect disparate areas and disparate fields, I think is particularly fruitful. But I want to leave time for questions and allow folks to express their thoughts. So I'll just stop there.
Thank you so much, Brian. So I am just so fascinating how your careers have led you in all of these different directions, but there's been this common thread of learning business skills and stepping out of your comfort zone, exercising leadership and project management. So let's see who has some questions. Is there someone who wants to start with a question? And turn your camera on, introduce yourself, and direct your question to one or more panelists.
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
So my name is Alok Kumar. So I'm a postdoc fellow in the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, University of Maryland School of Medicine, Baltimore. So I have been in a postdoc for a long time, almost 7 years after my PhD. So my one master is in physics and the second master in material science and engineering. And PhD, I did in material science and engineering, but specialization in biomaterials.
Look, could you go ahead and get to your question? That's okay. If you want to follow up later with the panelists.
Yeah, thank you. So the question is that I'm exploring the few opportunities, whether it will be good to go in the industry or academia, because I have interest doing working on a new idea, developing a new biomaterials or technology. So if I go to the industry, whether I will be able to do work on the new ideas or not, or independent ideas. And the second question I have, that if I want to start a company later stage based on my new invention, so if I work in the industry, whether the non-competing agreement with this company prevent me to start any new venture in future. Oh.
You're on mute, Susan.
Thank you so much. That's a great question. Let's combine it. It seems like the real root of it is if I go to private industry and I want to do something later, how does that all work out? And maybe Doug and then Nalini could take the question, and Brian, you may add in too.
So firstly, when you join a company, generally, you'll sign something that says anything you do, whether you're being paid for it or not, during the time that you're employed belongs to the company. That's kind of a standard situation. However, that always is in the form of a right of first refusal, meaning you develop something, you're working on something, you disclose that to the company and say, I've been working on this, I think it's interesting, I'm interested in pursuing it. The company has the right to take it and pursue it, or the right to, or they can refuse and say, no, it's yours, you can do whatever you want with it. Sometimes, it depends on how competitive what you're doing is to that company. Sometimes it's advantageous to be partnered with that company. It can be launched within the company. I mean, the company I worked for a long time, SAI, I mean, we spun off all sorts of new things into separate little companies or little divisions. And then the beauty of that is you have their capital to help support what you want to do. You know, they're a big bank. They've got profit. And you say, I need $200,000 to start this thing. And they go, okay, here's a 200K line, go do this. And of course, they're going to take a lot of the profit, but that's okay. You're getting paid well and doing good things and you have lots of resources. Or they may say, oh, no, you are welcome to leave the company and do this. Have a good day. That will be between you and the organization. By the way, at universities, it's pretty much the same kind of thing. If you're developing it there, you're going to have to get their permission out of their tech transfer office to launch it outside of the university. And some of them are interested in doing that. And some of them are like, no, we're going to continue to work on that here. So that's my 2 cents on what that's like.
Nalini, and Brian, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Doug's put it really, really well. Douglas, sorry, I keep calling you Doug. I think the only thing I would say is if you have a strong infrastructure at UMBC, I presume you're at Baltimore, but if you have a strong support infrastructure to spin out a technology and develop it to a certain level where it'll have some tangible value rather than an idea, then going into a company and doing exactly what Douglas suggested would make a lot of sense. You can take it a little farther and then exit early, but you don't build enough value that way. So it all depends on where you are. The only other thing I would add is you have some very interesting mix of skill sets that could be interesting to, you know, a lot of different biophysical type of device companies. Materials are really important in device companies. We're actually a materials company. We take it in many, many different directions. So, you know, that's another thing, not knowing the stage of your idea, you could do both. But as Douglas says, you have to be careful because once you join a company, they own you, they own your IP. And it's very tough to separate what you did on the job versus what you did outside of the job.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd just say I agree with everything Douglas and Nalini said. I'm not sure I have anything additional to add.
Great. That's a wonderful question, Alok. Thank you so much. Let's see who else has some questions.
I have a question, if I can direct it to Dr. Brian Borak.
Sure.
So, well, I've been really fortunate to start engaging in research since undergrad. I was able to work for a DARPA project, and now that I'm doing my PhD, I'm working on a DOE project for solar desalination. So I find it just really awesome to engage in these.
Sebastian, it looks like you're freezing up.
Yeah, I didn't get the rest of the question.
Okay, Sebastian, why don't you type your question in the chat box, or go ahead, try to finish one more time. But if you're not coming through, we'll go on to another question and then.
Okay, I'll try it. Basically my question is, how does it look from the industry side with these high risk, high reward projects, and more than anything in terms of the scope of work? Because in graduate school, you get to look very deeply into a narrow thing. Well, when you're managing something, it's more, you need to keep updated with all these tiny things, but look from a generalized perspective.
Okay, so do you get a sense of that question?
Your perspective on that?
Yeah, some of the differences between, if I'm understanding correctly, a real narrow graduate school perspective versus being out there in an agency or in industry.
Yeah, I think I'm getting a sense for the question, but you know, correct me if I'm wrong. And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a different perspective to be taking because, yeah, you're definitely in the research lab in the weeds quite a bit more than when you're like supervising a portfolio of projects where you have to kind of look at what I think the important thing is keeping laser focused on what are the end objectives of the project and what are we ultimately looking for to have maximum impact? I mean, that's kind of really what most of ARPA-E and other agencies are looking for, is maximizing impact and the return to kind of the American taxpayer, essentially, in terms of scientific and technology development. And so, you know, sometimes that requires pivots in the technology. And so figuring out if the original objectives are no longer valid or can't be accomplished, what else could it be used for that's impactful? And having the flexibility to be able to make those changes, I think, is important, and identify them as early as possible. But I think really just taking an approach of looking at it as managing risk to a large degree is something to keep focused on, because even though it is a high risk project, you want to make sure that you're using the money effectively as possible. But I think that's getting to your question, but let me know if there's some part that I'm missing.
No, yes.
Nalini and Douglas, what do you think about that, the differences and some of this question about taking on high risk projects?
I'm not sure that I am the right person to answer it. I think Douglas may be better.
I don't know. I think what Brian pointed out is important. I mean, everything you work on, and this is general advice for everything, is you don't know what all the different potential applications and uses are for the things that you're working on. And that opportunity recognition is one of the most important things that any entrepreneurial mindset gives you. But definitely identifying the things that are going to have return and value is the key thing to making something succeed. So I think what Brian said is very appropriate.
It sounds like it's a real shift in mindset. And I'm just curious if the panelists might share how you shifted from the mindset of graduate education, really focused, to learning all these new skills, because I know oftentimes the fear of that pivot can be something that keeps people on the track that they originally thought of. So how did you shift your mindsets? Or were you just already in these mindsets, the entrepreneurial mindset, or was it something you learned?
I think in my case, first, I'm if you saw the list of things that I've worked on, I'm very weird in that I like lots of different things. I don't like, you know, the old joke about knowing more and more about less and less till you know everything about nothing. That's not my idea of fun. And that's one of the reasons I've liked my career, where I've done, you know, no two projects have ever been the same. I mean, I've dabbled in pretty much every technology out there by the nature of what I've done. And that's what's interesting to me. I mean, I have 3 degrees. My bachelor's, my thesis work was a numerical modeling problem. My master's was experimental plasma physics, and my doctorate was a theoretical astrophysics thing. So I have 1 degree that's analytical, numerical, and experimental. That's not what people typically do. But I think that variety has made life interesting. I don't want to do one thing. I don't like doing one thing at a time. So I think that's just been my character, and that had a lot to do with it. Whether it's learnable or not, that's one of the great debates in entrepreneurship education.
Nalini and Brian, what do you think?
I guess I'll jump in and say, I think one of the biggest shifts for me was learning time management. So like as a grad student, you know, you get your stipend, and you can have a lot of freedom to explore different experiments and different approaches to things. But, you know, I think once you hit industry, you know, the time management part becomes a lot more important, and recognizing the challenges that you can attack yourself versus the ones that you need to delegate to others, versus ones where you can get an expert outside opinion. I think developing that sort of skill set becomes very important, because, you know, in grad school, I basically had to teach myself Marcus electron transfer theory by reading a whole bunch of books and, you know, reading a whole bunch of papers. And, you know, I learned it pretty well, but, you know, I would say that it was probably not the most efficient way. Whereas like now, you know, if I need an expert opinion on something, I can call up a colleague or a friend who's, you know, for example, a mechanical engineer and has expertise in heat transfer or something like that. So I can get an expert opinion on something, and I can have that reach back support so that I can get an answer more quickly. I think it's crucial, and this also comes back to your networking, because having the connections, having the relationships with folks that you can reach out to so that you can ask them questions, then they can ask you questions. I think that's really important.
Nalini, what about your experience with the shift from the grad school experience to industry and from large and small companies? Was it a shift in mindset, or was it just sort of you being you?
It was me being thrown into situations and having no choice but to change and learn if I wanted to do well. And I think fundamentally, and I would imagine anyone doing a PhD has a drive to do well. You know, you're not just there because you want to sit in grad school for several years and get a PhD at the end of the name. You're really driven by something. And if you have that drive, you're thrown into situations, you just learn because you want to be successful. And that's always been my course experience. I haven't stopped learning, right? You never stop learning, you never stop changing. I'm no expert in anything, and I could learn from everybody on this call, the same as maybe I have something to offer to everyone as well. So I look at it as a constant learning experience, a constant challenge, constantly looking at ways I can do things better and differently.
So I want to really be mindful of the time, and we had an excellent question come in from Siobhan. Siobhan, I want to give you the opportunity to ask directly, but if you don't turn your camera on, I'm assuming you just want your question read. Okay. So, oh, go ahead, Siobhan.
I'm sorry, I'm having difficulties with my camera.
Okay.
That's how I sent the message, but I can ask my question directly.
Sure. Go right ahead.
Thank you. So I was wondering, for all three panelists, so gauging the current times, what are the current needs for companies in forecasting their business outlook, as well as their strategy for prospective graduate students and postdocs to keep in mind?
What a great question. I think COVID has thrown a big wrench in. So are there some things that you're all in different industries and have different perspectives? So what do grad students and postdocs need to keep in mind about your industries and potential employment? Great question.
I would say on my end, it's being adaptable and flexible is certainly one thing. I mean, I think the past year, if it's taught us anything, all of us, it's that we need to be adaptable and flexible given new circumstances. And I think, you know, to the extent that you can show that and that you can learn and adapt, that's certainly going to help things. And that you can translate your skills into a lot of different areas. And that, but most importantly, I would say is probably that you're a critical thinker and that you can dissect problems and have a rational way of approaching them. So that's my take.
Yeah, I would add a couple of things. I'm not sure that where your question may be coming from, so hopefully I'll address it. But when you look at industries, there's two things, like the industry looking at you and you looking at where do I want to be. I would cast a wide net, wider than you might imagine if you're applying to industry. On the other hand, if someone hires you, they may hire you for two reasons. One is they want specifically your skills, your expertise that you bring to the table, and they have a gap in their company to fill that skill. They might also hire you because they see potential in you to do more beyond what you are. Once you get into the company, I would say be very flexible and open to trying out new things and gaining new skill sets. I've done things where I have taken lateral moves. I've even stepped down from being a manager to learn skill sets that in the long run help me in my career. So I would say, in your journey, in your career journey, be flexible and open to new experiences and doing new types of things. But at the beginning also, cast a wide net, and then, again, network.
Yeah, I would agree with what the other panelists have said, and I'd add on that whatever company you get into, your first company or your second, third, however many you work for, connect with all of the different operations in there. Make sure you meet marketing people and financial people and sales people and production people, and that you learn all the different things that go on, because that understanding is what's going to move you forward. If you're just doing the R&D side, that's great, but there's somebody who has to go sell it, or somebody who's actually connected to what the market is asking for. So the more of these different functions within every business that you get connected with, the more valuable you're going to be, and the easier it's going to be for you to see what the near future is looking like, and being able to jump when you should jump, or dig in deeper when you need to dig in deeper, if you're watching all the functions, all the things that are happening within a company. And it's important to stay up with things in industry. I think one of the other things I'd recommend to everybody is read a lot, all different kinds of things, not just the stuff in your field. And it's time consuming. It's not just a matter of my reading Astrophysical Journal every month to stay up on that. Yeah, that's cool, but read all sorts of things. Just have Apple News open on your tablet and read what's going on in everything, because everything's connected to everything. And that's something I don't think people realize, that if you connect up and realize all the things that are going out there, you'll have a much better sense of what to do and what's facing your company or what's facing your career.
That is just a perfect summary. Our panelists gave you lots of gems. They have been so gracious with their time. I know that everyone on this call can just see how talented and how gracious you've been to give of your time. So I would, I know we're out of time, and I want to be respectful of our panelists' time. Attendees, if you want to unmic and say thank you, let our panelists see and hear your gratitude. I can't thank our panelists enough. I hope that they will take all of the gems of advice that you've given. And I know some folks may follow up with individual questions. We've provided your LinkedIn profiles, and they can reach out to you that way. So I see mechanical applause, but how about some thank yous in real life, old fashioned voices?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. I'm going to stop the recording.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.